The belt was soft, but my body shook. He didn't untie me. I didn't ask him to. I knelt. He watched. And I stayed there. He touched nothing. But I fell apart. I tied my own wrists. Then waited, he said. Still. And I froze mid-breath, one chair between us. One rule broken, no sex, no kiss, just my knees on the floor. He didn't flinch. That's when I knew the rope wasn't tight. But it changed me. He watched me shake. I let him. My wrists were bound. My voice wasn't. He left the room. I stayed kneeling. I asked for stillness. He gave me collapse. His eyes didn't wander. Mine did. I quivered. Before he touched me, he wasn't mine. But I gave him my silence. My body spoke. He listened without words. What broke me wasn't his hands. It was my own. I've never told anyone this. Not my ex, not my therapist, not even myself, not out loud. I used to be a woman with perfect posture, a founder, a leader, a voice that didn't shake on stage, in boardrooms or during layoffs. They used to call me unshakable. They were wrong. Because I remember exactly what broke me. And it didn't come with headlines or lawsuits or screaming matches. It came one quiet night, in the middle of nowhere, in front of someone I was never supposed to need. That night, the wind had been howling. The power flickered twice before going out completely. The whole cabin dropped into darkness, save for the hallway light I left on. I always left one on, ever since the panic attack started. He'd gone quiet for hours. I assumed he was asleep. I was wrong. I tried to breathe through it. The tightness in my chest, the shaking in my fingers, the heat in my face that felt like shame or fever or both. But the floor was the only thing that felt real, cold and hard beneath my knees. I dropped there, not collapsed, not faint, just folded. It wasn't the first time, but it was the first time I didn't hide it, because when I looked up, he was standing there, barefoot, hoodie hanging off his shoulder, silent. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't flinch. He walked into the room slowly, the way you approach a scared animal, or someone praying. And I didn't say a word. I didn't need to, because the belt was already on the chair, because my hands were already trembling, because some part of me knew what I needed, even if my mouth hadn't formed the words. I lifted my arms, and he knelt, and neither of us pretended it meant nothing. I was already on my knees when he walked in. The floor was cold. My thighs were clenched. My breath had gone shallow again. That familiar spiral where my hands trembled, my jaw locked, and I couldn't remember how to feel real. I didn't look up. Not yet. The chair was behind me. The belt, soft cotton, frayed at the ends, lay curled by the leg like it knew what it was for. He saw the belt. He saw my wrists. He didn't ask. I didn't speak. I just lifted my arms, slow, like the breath between sobbing and surrender. And he stepped closer. His knee touched the floor first, then the other. We were both down there, quiet and low, surrounded by silence thicker than the air. I didn't flinch when he picked up the belt. I flinched when he paused. His fingers brushed my pulse as he wrapped it around. Twice, gently, my skin welcomed the pressure, not because it hurt, but because it gave shape to the chaos inside me. I was wearing my oldest sleep shirt, threadbare, no bra. When I exhaled, the fabric lifted slightly away from my chest. His eyes followed it. I felt the heat in his breath shift, move down, then hover. The knot wasn't tight, just enough to keep my hands together in my lap. "I can stop," he whispered, but I didn't want him to. My knees burned against the wood, but I didn't move. His face hovered near mine, just inches above. His hand came to my shoulder, not pushing, not pulling, just there. I could feel how warm his palm was through the cotton. My breath hitched. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. The weight in his stare said everything. He saw me. The way I was folded, broken, kneeling. He saw what I'd never shown anyone. My thighs shifted apart barely, not an invitation. Not exactly, just a reflex. Like my body leaning toward the only thing that had made it feel less alone. My voice cracked. I wasn't even sure what word was forming. Foo. His hand ghosted the hem of my shirt. No. My head tilted forward, eyes closed, breath trembling. Yes. He never touched more. He didn't need to. My pulse was loud enough for both of us. I stayed still, the rope warm against my skin, my breath heavy, my chest rising. My hands trembled, but I didn't pull away. He stood first, slowly, his shadow crossing over mine. His eyes caught the soft curve of my mouth, the small hollow of my neck, the way my hair stuck to my temple with sweat. He left the room, and I stayed, still kneeling, still bound, still burning in the center of a storm I hadn't meant to start. I used to be in control, but that night I tied my own hands and let someone younger decide when I could breathe. It didn't feel like crossing a line. It felt like collapsing into something I hadn't let myself want. I told myself I was healing, but some part of me wanted to break just one more time. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. Not with him, not at my age, not after everything. But what would you do if the only person who made you feel whole again was the one you should never have touched? Maybe it wasn't submission. Maybe it was survival. Some stories don't begin with a kiss. They begin when your body asks for something your mind still says no to. If that makes sense to you, stay. This doesn't end with closure. There are things I used to believe about myself. That I was strong. That I didn't need softness. That if I worked hard enough, I could outrun the feeling of being breakable. I was wrong about all of it. I didn't fall apart the night I lost my company, or when the board forced me out. Not even when the investors stopped answering my calls. I didn't break when I signed the divorce papers, alone in a courthouse hallway with a dying phone battery and swollen eyes. But I broke slowly, quietly, the kind of collapse that doesn't look like one from the outside. Just less and less of you showing up to your own life. That's why I came here. Not to heal, just to disappear somewhere too quiet for anyone to ask questions. The house belonged to my ex-husband's uncle. Empty, remote, far enough up the Oregon hillside that the fog made the driveway feel like it was floating. The first month I barely spoke. The second, I started talking to plants. Not because I believed they could hear me, but because it made the silence less judgmental. And then one day, he showed up. Lucas, my ex's son from his first marriage, 21, a film student apparently taking a semester off to figure things out. His mother had remarried and moved out of state. He didn't want to go with her. He asked if he could stay here for a few weeks. I said no. Then I said yes. I still don't know why. He was taller than I remembered. Quieter, too. He moved around the house like he didn't want to disturb anything, not even the shadows. He barely touched his phone. Spent hours reading or editing something on his laptop with headphones in. We didn't talk much, but he noticed things, like how I never left the kitchen light on, how I made coffee but didn't drink it, how I wore the same grey sweater 3 days in a row. One night, I woke up gasping, chest tight, palms sweating, full body panic with no clear trigger. The lights were still off, but the hallway creaked. He didn't come into the room. He just stood at the door and said, "Breathe in through your nose, hold it, then out slow." Like he'd done this before, like he knew the shape of panic and didn't need to see mine to understand it. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just said, "I'll leave a cup of water outside the door." It was warm, with lemon. That was the first night I slept through until morning. A week passed like that. Him in his quiet corners, me in mine, brushing past each other like ghosts in an old house. Then came the night we sat at the kitchen table. No reason, no occasion, just soup, just silence. He looked up halfway through eating and said, "You don't talk to yourself out loud anymore." I paused. I didn't know I did. "You did. A lot. The first week. You talked about the plants, the smell of dust, the way soup steams when it's sad." I felt my face heat. "Sorry." I liked it. That night, I left the hallway light on. He turned it off at 1 a.m., and neither of us mentioned it in the morning. A few nights later, the power flickered during a storm. We sat in the living room, each on our separate couch, half listening to the wind. He said, "You ever play freeze?" I looked at him. "The kids' game?" "Sort of, but not the way I learned it." He explained his version, a kind of mental reset. Sit still for as long as possible. Don't react to anything. Don't speak. Just stay. "If you stay completely still," he said, "you can feel what's actually real inside you. The rest drops off." "That sounds awful," he smiled. "It's harder than it sounds." I said nothing. But the next night I tried it, alone. Knees pulled in, hands pressed to my chest. My whole body trembled within the first 5 minutes. I broke the freeze in less than 7. But it left a mark. We didn't talk about freeze again. But a few days later, he was already in the living room when I came down, sitting cross-legged on the floor with the lights low. The sound of distant rain tapping against the skylight. He looked up and said, "You want to try?" I hesitated, but my body sat before my mouth could catch up. We didn't face each other. We sat side by side, eyes forward, still. It wasn't a game. It felt like something older than that. Something primal and restrained, like holding in a scream so long your bones learn how to whisper. I broke first, not with movement, but with a sound. A tiny exhale that cracked halfway through. He didn't look at me. He just said, "Still counts." I laughed, quiet, almost embarrassed. Then I leaned back and let the silence stretch long again. A few days later, we made a joke of it. If you can stay still for 5 minutes, I told him, I'll make banana bread. If I do 10, he said, you have to read one of my scripts. If you do 15, I said without thinking, I'll give you anything you want. The silence between us shifted. He didn't smile, didn't laugh. He just said, okay, but you're the timer. And that was the first time I noticed it. How quickly a quiet game turns into something else when no one names it. He didn't need to touch me, not yet. The air between us did that for him. The next day he set the chair in the center of the living room, not his usual couch, not my corner. The chair, the one I always avoided. Too stiff, too upright, no arms to lean into. A chair that forced posture, exposure. He didn't say anything when I walked in and saw it there. He just looked up from the floor and said, 15 minutes. I raised an eyebrow. You said anything? I felt a flicker deep in my chest. I could have laughed it off, said I forgot, said I was joking, but I didn't. I walked to the chair and sat, back straight, hands folded, legs crossed at the ankle like some memory of the boardroom I once ruled. He moved slowly, sat in front of me, on the floor again, just like before. I watched his eyes as they settled, not on my face, but on the way my fingers curled together, then up, to the curve of my throat, the way my sweater dipped just enough to show the hollow beneath my collarbone. His breath slowed, and I felt my own rise in response. Time passed. 5 minutes, maybe 7, maybe more. I adjusted my wrist slightly. He noticed. His eyes flicked to mine and then back down again. I'm still, I whispered. He nodded. I know. That night I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs. The chair was still there, the room dark. Only the hallway lamp behind me casting faint light across the hardwood. I stood over the chair. Then I sat. Then, I don't know why, I slid to my knees, slowly, like testing the weight of surrender. The cold floor met my skin, and a shiver ran up my spine. I pressed my hands into my thighs. My breath shallowed. My eyes closed. I didn't hear him enter, but I felt when the air changed. His feet stopped inches from mine. I didn't move, not because I was frozen, but because I didn't want to break whatever this was. I was still on my knees, thighs pressed together, hands clenched in my lap, my head bowed. He crouched in front of me. I shouldn't be here, he said. I nodded, barely. He looked at my hands, then at the belt from my robe, folded and soft, sitting on the seat of the chair behind me. I can leave, I exhaled. Or... My voice didn't finish the sentence, but my eyes did. He reached for the belt. My breath caught. I should have stopped him, but instead, I lifted my wrists. He wrapped them gently. No knots, just pressure. Enough to feel it. Enough to make me aware of where I ended. His fingers brushed the inside of my wrist and lingered. The warmth of his skin pulsed against mine. My heart pounded so loudly, I was afraid it might echo off the walls. Then he pulled back, sitting on the floor again, still in front of me. We stared at each other. No talking, no smiling. Just heat and uncertainty, thick enough to swallow the air. I adjusted my knees slightly. The hem of my sleep shorts rose with the motion. His eyes followed, then froze. He didn't speak, but his chest moved, like someone trying to hold back the tide. My sweater slipped off one shoulder. I didn't fix it. I just stayed like that, messy, loose, trembling. This is wrong. So why do I feel whole here? He reached toward me, not fast, not even sure, and stopped just before touching my cheek. His hand hovered, and then, almost imperceptibly, I leaned in, just enough for his fingertips to graze my jaw. That was all it took. I shuddered, from my chest to my hips, from the breath I lost to the one I didn't take. The rope around my wrists pressed into my lap. My pulse surged beneath it. I gasped, quiet, half moan, half shame. I don't know what you want me to do, he said hoarse. I don't either, I whispered. Just don't leave. His eyes closed, like it hurt to hear that. Then he leaned closer. His forehead touched mine. We stayed like that. Forehead to forehead. No kisses. No lines crossed in the obvious way. But inside me, everything ruptured. My legs trembled. My fingers curled. I shifted forward, letting my bound hands press lightly against his chest. He covered them with his own, and for a second I forgot my name. Forgot how to be anyone other than the woman kneeling in front of someone who saw too much, and still hadn't looked away. My breathing grew uneven, so did his. And then I said it. I don't know why, I just said it. You make it stop. He looked at me, confused. What? The panic, the shame, the noise. He shook his head. I'm not trying to, but you do. His thumb grazed the side of my mouth, a motion so light I wasn't sure it was real. My lips parted. He didn't kiss me. He just looked at my lips, at my hands, at the place where my thighs met the hem of cotton and breath. And I stayed kneeling, bound, burning, but still. For once, still. I didn't want this to mean everything, but it did. And now I don't know who I'll be when I have to untie myself. The next morning he didn't come downstairs. Neither did I. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, robe wrapped tight. The imprint of last night still curled around my body like smoke. My wrists held no marks, but I kept rubbing them like they did, like they should. The chair was still in the middle of the living room. The belt had been folded and placed neatly on the cushion. Not hidden, not tossed. Just waiting. I walked past it. Twice. Didn't sit. At lunch, we crossed paths in the kitchen. He poured coffee. I reached for the bread. He didn't look at me. I didn't ask why. The silence wasn't cold. It was fragile. Like glass we'd both stepped on barefoot and didn't want to move again. That night, I watched him from the hallway. He was on the couch, headphones in, eyes closed. The same sweatshirt, the same stillness. I held the doorway like a shield. I wanted to ask, what now? But I knew better. We'd built something too careful to poke at. Instead, I whispered. I moved the chair. He didn't open his eyes, just nodded. And I felt my stomach twist, because even that hurt. The days blurred. He stayed longer than he'd planned, or maybe he never had a plan to begin with. But the distance grew, the subtle kind, made of unsaid things and extra time between footsteps. We were still polite, still functional, still pretending it hadn't happened. But we never played freeze again. We never sat in the same room past sunset. We never mentioned the rope. I found myself touching the objects he'd used. The belt, the chair, the glass he always used for water, still stained faintly with lemon. I placed them in new places, rearranged them like puzzle pieces that no longer fit the original frame. One morning, I opened a drawer and found a folded note. Still counts. No name, no context, just that. I stared at it for 10 full minutes, then I folded it again and put it back. We didn't talk about it. That made it worse. Sometimes silence isn't mercy. It's a slow kind of rot. He left on a Tuesday. Didn't tell me the night before. No long talk, no confrontation. Just 2 knocks on the door. Heading out, he said. I stood in the entryway, arms crossed. That's it? I asked. He shrugged. You said you needed stillness. I wanted to scream or cry, or say, I didn't mean from you, but I couldn't find the breath. He looked down at his bag. I didn't mean to confuse things. My jaw tightened. You didn't confuse me. Good, he said, but he didn't sound convinced. He opened the door. Fog poured in like breath from another world. Then he turned back once, eyes scanning my face like he was trying to memorize it without permission. I didn't touch you, he said. I know, but I felt everything. I blinked hard. So did I. After he left, I put the chair away. Not in storage, not out on the curb. Just by the window, angled toward the light. I couldn't sit in it, but I also couldn't not see it. 2 days later, the phone rang. It was Mark, my ex-husband. We hadn't spoken in months. His voice sounded distant, like he was calling from behind a closed door. Is Lucas okay? He asked. I blinked. What? He texted me weird stuff. Something about a chair, a storm, said you saved his brain, then went offline. I gripped the receiver tighter. He's gone. Left town, said he was heading south. Didn't say where. Silence. I know things got messy for you, Mark said, gentler now. But did anything happen I should know about? I looked at the window, the fog, the chair, and I lied. No, nothing happened. I've said that line every day since. When I fold laundry, when I cook, when I stare at the drawer where the note still lives, nothing happened. Except I let myself be seen in the weakest moment of my life, and I didn't run. I didn't beg. I knelt. And I stayed. I reached for him like a lifeline, but maybe I wasn't drowning. Maybe I was dragging him under too. And still, I'd do it again. I'm not proud of what I did. But for a moment, I didn't feel like a woman unraveling. I felt like a body that someone chose to steady, not fix, not own, just see. If you've ever wanted someone to hold your chaos without cleaning it up, you're not alone. Some of us don't want rescue. We just want to be still and not disappear.